Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. Now this week we have a nice selection of projects and things on funding websites, along with announcing the winners of the Remodo competition that we announced last week. And there's also some kind of cool and interesting news about the Arduino Cloud. So without any further ado, let's get going. And we're starting this week's show with a little bit of news from Raspberry Pi and from Arduino. And the big news from this week is that the Raspberry Pi RP2040 chips, just the system on chip themselves, are now available to buy. And as the blog post says, the RP2040 is now on sale for $1. This in and of itself isn't particularly big news. They were always going to sell the system on chips alone, and in fact they've been sending reels of them out to people for a long time. We know this to be the case because there are loads of RP2040 boards out there from Arduino, from Adafruit, from Pimoroni. A lot of smaller scale makers are creating their own boards using the system on chip as well. The thing that's notable about this is that it is actually available. Because as this article touches on, the global semiconductor shortage means it's practically impossible to get enough chips for a production run of a development board, especially if you're a smaller maker. If you told me last year that the only place you could buy microcontrollers in 2021 would be the Raspberry Pi Foundation, who previously were not particularly known for microcontrollers, I would have been surprised, to say the least. So as it says here, they've pulled around 40,000 units of the RP2040 out of the supply chain for single sales, and they will be at $1 each. And if you head to the product page, you can get the chips by themselves. So if you are thinking of making a run of something of your own boards to prototype or try something with the RP2040, I'd get in there because 40,000 isn't an awful lot of chips. But yes, if you were looking to buy a microcontroller to create your own board from scratch and were struggling to find any right now, the RP2040 might definitely be worth taking a look at. Moving on now to Arduino. Now, the Arduino Cloud, if you haven't used it, is a very simple way to get little IoT projects up and running. It has several tiers in terms of pricing, and the free version is enough to get a feel of whether you would want to use it or not. In my experience, while I haven't used it too much because I was already messing around with IoT stuff before the Arduino Cloud was a big thing, if I was in the process of teaching people about IoT, I'd probably use the Arduino Cloud at this stage. It's really feature complete, and it has a lot of nice things in it. Now, ESP32 support is huge because for many people the ESP32 has completely superseded the ESP8266 with good reason. It's way more powerful, there's a lot you can do with it, but yes, the fact that the Arduino Cloud now supports it is going to be great news for many. Incidentally, if you're not familiar with the Arduino Cloud, there are a couple of nice features you get out of the box that otherwise you would just have to implement yourself. One of them is interaction mode variables. This is essentially creating callback functions. But whenever you create a variable in interaction mode, it will essentially mean that every single time that variable is modified, it will run code on the ESP32, run a function. Just a nice little touch, it's a little thing. If you're not already familiar with the cloud and you want a quick way to get up and running with stuff, maybe have a quick look at the docs, because as I previously mentioned, Arduino have just upgraded all of their docs and they do look very fancy now. Now, last year we talked about MyCobot, which is a little robotic arm that works with the ESP32 chip, specifically with the M5 stack range of little ESP32 development kits, which are very beautiful little development kits if you haven't come across them as well. But MyCobot are back, and now you can use the little robotic arms they make with the Raspberry Pi. And there is a great write-up on the new robot arm and the differences between it and the old one on the always fantastic CNX software. And as you can see, the two robot arms look almost identical. There's a big difference here, being that this one comes with a screen, but the MyCobot M5 is essentially the same as the old one. This is the one with the ESP32 chip in, but it says M5 because it's an M5 stack development board. And this is the Raspberry Pi version, both of which have very functional robot arms, which can have various attachments on the end, including a little sucker for picking things up. So as it mentions here, there are differences between the M5 and Pi versions of MyCobot, but they're sort of obvious versions because it's a Raspberry Pi in one and an ESP32 development kit in the other. So because it's an M5 kit, there's a bunch of nice things fitted into it. So it does have a screen, it does have a nice little camera module, a RISC-V camera module for the M5 stack version. That is the Arduino compatible ESP32 chipped version that you're seeing in this picture here. And as you are also seeing in this picture here, as well as using the Arduino IDE, they do have their own block-based programming tool, which is a bit like Blockly or Scratch or anything that you're used to, which works with, you're seeing on this over here, you're seeing an M5 stack unit. That's what they look like when they're not packed in a robot, but it works functionally the same way. And of course, there's also this Raspberry Pi version. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I kind of find the Raspberry Pi version maybe a little bit more exciting than the M5 version. Not that there's anything to sniff at. We were just talking about how good the ESP32 modules are, and it comes with a bunch of nice things built in, like a camera. But there's just something so nice about having the Raspberry Pi on board, knowing that the robot truly does have its own operating system, knowing that for whatever reason, if you really wanted to, you could have the robot arm also be a server, also be whatever a Raspberry Pi can do. Because you can see here that all of the pins are still available for the Raspberry Pi. You can still use it just like you would any regular Raspberry Pi. It just happens to be in a rather fancy looking robot arm. So MyCobot now has a Pi version, and I think it is a very good thing too. Being able to develop using the regular Raspberry Pi operating system with a 6 degrees of freedom robotic arm is, it's a nice idea. And of course you can put your regular ROS robot operating system on it if you want to as well. So linked from this CNX software article is their shop, and as you can see here in the shop, if I get myself out of the way slightly, the ESP32 version is 489 euros and 65 cents, and the Raspberry Pi version is 571 euros and 40 cents. So for a little bit of currency context here, it is saying $599 and $699 respectively. So yes, if you're interested, I will link the CNX article in the description of the video so you can go and have a look at it for yourself. Just before we move on, a little quick housekeeping. If you're not already subscribed to the Electromaker YouTube channel, please consider doing so. It shouldn't change your day-to-day usage of YouTube all that much at all. Now, if you click the notification bell, it will. That will notify you whenever there is a new video on the Electromaker YouTube channel, but functionally that is just this show. We pretty much only put up one video a week, and it is the Electromaker Show. Sometimes there are other videos, but it is very rare. You won't be getting spammed from us. Finally, if you click like on the video, everyone asks you to smash that like button, and I'd rather you didn't smash anything. But if you like the video, it lets YouTube know that you like it, and it means that they'll probably show other like-minded people that, you might like this video, put it in their recommendations, all that kind of stuff. So there are 3 free things you can do to really help the show. If you're looking for things for a project, like a hobby project, we do also have a shop at electromaker.io which stocks pretty much everything that you could want. So have a little look there if you're thinking of getting stuff for a project. And finally, we have a Discord server. There's no obligation to join it, but it's a fun place to be, show off your projects, and just hang out with other people who watch the show. So yes, thank you for all of the support you've been showing the show so far, and for not getting too angry at me asking you to do this stuff every week. It's just sort of what you have to do when you make a show. But for now, let's get on with the rest of said show. It is time for us to announce the winners of the Remodo competition we started on last week's show. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar, this little device here is a Remodo remote. It has 4 buttons on it. It looks quite nice and fancy. This is a Bluetooth low-energy remote designed for working with Raspberry Pis and homemade IoT systems. It'll also work with anything else that attaches via Bluetooth. Remodo very kindly sent us this to give away as a prize, along with a couple of other things. This is a smart remote control, which is like a regular tele remote control, but works with an app as well via Bluetooth. So your phone connects to this via Bluetooth, and then this connects to anything that takes infrared, like a television. And then this is a smart home hub, which connects to your local network, does all the smartphone things you would expect, but also has an infrared receiver. So you can sort of begin to see how these 3 prizes might work together. And the way you enter this competition was by being a subscriber to the channel, by saying what you would do if you won this prize, and then by leaving a hashtag. That's how these special competitions work. And we now have a winner. Now, picking a prize winner was not easy. There were a lot of really nice ideas in the comment section from last week's video, but we have picked a winner, and that winner is Jeroen Voogd, whose name I have just pronounced terribly. Sorry. But yes, the thing that really grabbed our attention with this idea is the fact that it would integrate this into an already existing DIY IoT design. Using Blink, as he already uses, if you're not familiar, Blink is a mobile platform which allows you to drag and drop things into an app on your phone, and then it communicates with the Blink server, either the Blink Cloud, or you can run the Blink server on your own devices. And also a Raspberry Pi with an LCD touchscreen. I'm really interested to see how you integrate these things into your smart home system, and if you want to write it up and put it on the Electromaker website, that would be awesome as well. But thank you to everyone who entered this competition. We will be doing another special competition next week. We don't usually do them week on week, but next week's show is a very special show because we will be celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Electromaker Show, and we have another very special prize to give away then. But for this week, congratulations, Jeroen. I'm terribly sorry once again, but let's get on with the rest of the show.
Jeroen. Pretty straightforward. Once you know, Jeroen. And now you know. Here are more videos on how to...
I could have just looked that up before, couldn't I? It is time for funding website things, and this week we're starting on Kickstarter with a duo of boards which are similar but have a couple of interesting differences. The Arduino Sleepkeeper and the portable Raspberry Pico Pal are two development boards that are very similar in some ways, but of course have different cores. Because the Arduino Sleepkeeper has the ATmega 328P chip that you'll find in most Arduino boards, or at least most of the original Arduino boards, and the Raspberry Pi Pico has, well, a Raspberry Pi Pico, and it comes with a Raspberry Pi Pico built into the development board, which is quite a nice touch. So starting with the Arduino Sleepkeeper, well, there's a bunch of things here that are useful for tracking sleep. There's a heart rate monitor, as you can see, a microphone here, there is also an audio output there, and there is an SD card here for logging or for pulling out audio files for reading out to you, and of course the battery for the real-time clock. As it mentions here, there is a PIR motion sensor plugin, and you can buy that with the board if you want. And one of the things I found very interesting is this large audio library. It has numbers from 0 to 999,999,999, in case you need all of those numbers, all of the days of the week and the months of the year. And it's a library that is still being worked on. And yeah, it's a nice way of sort of having an easy output system for voice without having to pull some kind of full voice assistant into a project, especially when you're using something as simple as an Arduino microcontroller. Now, the portable Pico Pal is similar, but with a number of crucial differences. It has all the same functionality as the Arduino one, as far as I can tell, but as you can see here, in this, again, unfortunately slightly squashed picture, but you can still get very much the right idea. This is a breakout board for the Pi Pico as much as it is a development board with all of this stuff in and of itself. These dip switches allow you to switch between things, and it still has, yeah, all of the same functionality as the other microcontroller did, or the other microcontroller-based board did. Both of these seem really, really fascinating ideas for development boards, and I really love the fact that it seems to be a one-man gig. In fact, as he mentions at the very start of this Kickstarter, Patrick, who's come up with this, Patrick Mitchell, has put out 37 different Kickstarter campaigns for various different things like this. This is someone who is experienced in putting something for funding and actually coming through with it at the end, which is quite nice to know. So I will leave a link to this in the description of the video. If you would like to support the project, you can pledge $89 for either one, or you can get both for $162, the everything package. And the project has already made its goal, but they're just very, very interesting boards. It's the kind of thing that I imagine if you're interested in the Pi Pico, having a nice little setup development board like this will be something that you would be interested in having a look at. So I will leave a link to this in the description of the video. Moving over to Crowd Supply with the stereo mic and speaker hat. Now this is a lovely little hat for the Raspberry Pi, which just gives you a simple Class D amplifier for small speakers. And of course it has a number of nice RGB LEDs on there too. This is really nice because it's just plug and play. You stick it on, turn the Pi on, and it will just work. As it mentions here, it has an onboard EEPROM that dynamically loads the device tree and requires no installation. And other than that, it seems to be remarkably simple, and that's a good thing. While the Raspberry Pi can be a perfect thing for working with audio, doing audio with, there can also be a number of issues, and you don't always want to get a set of speakers and plug it into the 3.5mm port, or set up audio over HDMI, or any of those things. Sometimes you just want your Raspberry Pi to have small speakers and just make a little bit of noise. This also has a MEMS microphone built in. If you wanted to make a little homegrown voice assistant Alexa type device, then this would be a really good way of doing it. In fact, the breakout boards for many industrial units are very similar to this. They have stereo outputs and stereo MEMS inputs for voice recognition and for speaking back to you. This is going to be a very useful thing to have. So this is pre-launch, as you can tell by the page. There are a few specs on the page already, and there's another image of it just here. And as most things are on Crowd Supply, this is a completely open source project, so they have published a few things already on their GitHub repository if you want to go and have a look. But for now, I will leave a link to this in the description of the video. It's definitely one we'll be coming back to because you know me, Raspberry Pi audio, can't stay away. But if you want to have a look at it for now or sign up, you can. And of course, as I mentioned, everything they've done so far is up here on their GitHub page. We're going to finish this week's show by looking at a few videos and projects I saw this week. Although the first video we're looking at isn't actually from this week, it's from a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not quite sure how I managed to miss it, because it's from the YouTuber Carl Bugeja, whose name I probably mispronounced, who makes fantastic PCB-based actuators and motors, and he has turned his little his little motor that is wound onto a PCB into a tiny little robot. Now, Carl's videos are always fantastic. They're shot beautifully, the explanations are wonderful, and the things he makes are wonderful as well. So rather than me just explain it all the way through, I would suggest you go and look at the video. But in brief, he has created a little PCB here, which has all the things you need on it to make a balancing robot. It has a microcontroller, it has a Bluetooth low energy chip, it has an inertial measurement unit, and that's about it, some voltage control as well. And the idea being that this board can sit in the middle and be powered, and it can attach to two of his Pancake PCB motors, which he's had on the channel a lot before. They are little PCB windings, which basically means that you can just put magnets on top of it and turn it into a motor. And he creates the wheels by 3D printing them, putting a bearing in the middle, and putting some magnets around the side. This is version 1 of the robot, and the video is just, yes, just wonderful. I love seeing his thinking process, seeing his design process, and as I've said, he's a fantastic video maker, which helps a lot as well. And here you can see the little guy flying around, and it's a very cute little machine. Carl goes into a few iterations of the design process, and once again, I just suggest you go and have a look at the video. If you're not already subscribed to his channel, he puts out absolutely wonderful videos. I'm a big fan of his way of thinking and his way of designing stuff. While we are talking about YouTubers that make fantastic, beautiful looking videos about fantastic maker inventions, Integra is definitely worth a mention. The Portuguese maker recently put out a video on a Wankel rotary engine, and in fact, just above my head here, you can see the 2 weeks ago video is worth a watch as well to understand the Wankel rotary engine side of it. But this is converting that, instead of working on compressed air, into working using CO2 gas. Now, this video especially highlights one of the things I find so fantastic about Integra, that he doesn't necessarily have access to everything he needs to make stuff, so he makes almost everything himself, including a high pressure valve for remotely letting all of the CO2 out of the chambers. Not able to get a pump, he just built his own one out of a motor and gearing. It's fantastic stuff, and very, very funny.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Need I say more? Yeah, Integra, fantastic YouTuber, fantastic maker, brilliant videos, brilliant inventions. If you aren't already familiar with the channel, go. This is another one of those ones where I'm afraid you're probably going to go back and want to watch everything he makes, because yeah, he's done a lot of stuff, including making a 3D printed jet engine, which was sort of crazy. So yes, this is a Rotary Wankel remote control car, which uses CO2 gas to power it. As the video goes on, you can see how that comes together. Finally this week, a project on the Electromaker website from Rob Lauer. Now, this uses a Raspberry Pi 4 and a battery bank, and the idea being, let's see how long we can run a Raspberry Pi 4 and a power bank with a little hat for sensing temperature. Specifically the Blues wireless hat, which is something I wasn't all that familiar with before reading about this project. It looked pretty cool. Starting with the hat, it is as you can see, it has an edge connector here. There's also a little hat converter to put it on the Raspberry Pi, and this has cellular built into it, so I believe it might only be in the US of A. I will have to find that out, but if you don't have wireless and you don't have Ethernet and you still want to connect to the internet, these are all in one. You buy them and then that's it. You don't pay any extra coverage, and you get all the data in with it when you buy it. It has a bunch of other nice ways to connect to it as well, along with an accelerometer and a temperature sensor. But this is only the secondary thing that this project is really talking about. The main idea behind it is that let's see how long we can run a Pi 4. So it uses a 30,000 milliamp hour USB power bank and a Raspberry Pi 4 along with this, and the results are sort of interesting. So a lot of the project takes you through how to get set up with the hat, but the conclusion is even an unoptimized version will give you 41 hours of runtime, which isn't bad at all, actually. If you do actually optimize it, it adds an extra 8 hours to that, 49 hours, which is sort of cool. I like the idea of being able to get a decent battery bank and a Raspberry Pi and leave it somewhere to do a job for me, knowing I don't have to come back for it and change anything until the day after. Theoretically, if you were happy with it just cutting out and cutting back, you could just have a power bank at home charging overnight while the other one is out in the field, and you could just go and switch that every day. Completely DIY, 24/7 logging of something, who knows. And of course, you don't have to do this with the Blues wireless hat at all. But yeah, it seems like a cool piece of kit, one I'd never heard of before. So if you are interested, I will leave a link to this in the description of the video. That was our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for all of the support you were showing this show on YouTube. We are definitely noticing the difference. We have a Discord server if you would like to join it. There's a link to that in the description, and there is also a link to the Electromaker.io shop, which is probably the best way you can support the show. If you're looking for stuff for a new project, head over there and have a look. But the most important thing is that you have a safe, creative, and fun week, and I will see you in the next one.